All right, I think I know we have a full slate of content here, so how about we just kick this off? So I want to just say thank you all for joining us today. This is a very special webinar. We're joined by Strongly AI. Jared, I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself before we get started here.
I appreciate it, AJ. I'm the Chief AI Officer at Strongly. For those who are not familiar, Strongly is an AI software and engineering organization. We're doing a lot of work with agentic AI, autonomous agents, LLM-driven workflows, and enterprise applications that are supported by data and AI. We've been working with the Tanzu Data Intelligence stack for over a decade, so I have a lot of experience here and utilize this software to essentially move quicker, more secure, governed, and use all the goodness that the data intelligence stack provides. And I'm going to jump into a lot of that here in this webinar today.
Great, thank you, Jared. And I know everyone here must be familiar with our friend to the program, Ivan. Ivan will give you a minute as well.
Thanks, AJ. And I'm a product manager, Ivan Novick here at Broadcom, focused on data and data products. But more than that, I want to also just welcome again Jared and the Strongly team. Jared has, like he said, he's worked with us for over 10 years, specialist in Greenplum, especially when it comes to machine learning, artificial intelligence, and data science. And so it's just amazing to see what he and his team can build on top of our product. And that's why we want to get together today and talk about how AI is changing everything when it comes to data.
Excellent. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Jared. Let folks know, enough folks who have been joining us in. We do have the team from Strongly and from Broadcom in the chat. If you guys have any questions or would like to ask us anything throughout the presentation, we can address that directly in the chat and at the end of this presentation. Now, without further ado, let's hand this off to Ivan to kick us off.
Yep. So we're gonna do a focus today on financial services and financial intelligence, but really data and AI goes across all industries. And there was a quote that actually AI gave me recently, which was, "In the future, banks will be sovereign supercomputers." I think that's kind of funny, like because financial is really information, and information is data, and they use computers. So a sovereign supercomputer you can imagine is the bank of the future. But with that, let's get into it. We've got a pretty huge agenda. We're going to go through kind of key market trends. We're going to go through the Tanzu Data Intelligence and how it's being updated with AI, and then Jared's really going to get into how you use it from an application point of view with AI and machine learning and data science to get outcomes. So as far as what's changing, and I'll do this a little bit interactively on the fly with Jared here. People are having lots of business mandates coming from above saying, hey, let's use AI, let's do this, let's do that. At the same time, there's economic realities, which means we're going to do all this, we're going to do these amazing things, but let's also keep what's it going to cost us to do this on the table as well. And then the data tsunami and the need for speed, you've got just massive amounts of data, and it's going to become overwhelming, and we need to ensure we have platforms and capabilities to do that at the speed that's required. And then the AI wall and the cloud trap. So again, cost measures of AI can be out of control if not measured. AI is generating more workloads. If you're paying for workloads as you go, like in the cloud, you could escalate quickly. And so we want to really make sure you've got clear vision on your costs. And then from a security perspective, making sure you have perimeter security, but also you're defending against these new AI accelerated threats with scanning and whatnot. Jared, what else are you seeing is keeping people at night, the clients you talk to in this AI era?
I think you nailed it there. I mean, data sovereignty, especially when it comes to LLMs and sending your information off to third parties. I see that coming up more and more. And how do you leverage open weight models and bring that close to the data within either the cloud or air-gapped infrastructure? The big thing I think for this year is really around the ROI piece. People have placed their bets. There's been a lot of sandbox experiments, these demos where everyone sits around and claps. But really actually driving true ROI from these, and it goes back to a lot of what you said there. There's a lot of surprised actual running costs when you get these agentic AI systems out and they're making all these calls, hitting all this data. We're just accelerating the amount of work that is happening underneath the hood. And if you don't have the right cost controls and FinOps around that, causes a big issue in getting ROI. And then just the challenges of getting these very complex solutions that are still pretty on the bleeding edge of the the ecosystem of tooling around them, actually get them into production. And we talk about day two a lot, right? Actually getting it out there, monitoring drift, monitoring the cost controls, governance, and so forth, and making sure that you're not just deploying but actually running and getting that, realizing that ROI.
And Jared, we both worked previously at Pivotal, where we were spearheading agile development. So do you think an agile approach to introducing AI projects will help in terms of getting the ROI benefits?
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the really great things, whether you call it vibe coding or agentic engineering or graph agents, the fact that you can actually realize something, some software very, very quickly now, I think helps with that feedback loop. You can get something in front of users very, very quickly and start iterating on it, and moving a lot faster. So it's actually helping that flywheel move a lot quicker.
Right. Okay, so based on moving that flywheel quicker, when it comes to the data intelligence and the capabilities inside it, including Greenplum and Gemfire, real-time data mastery. So I think the key point here is that you're moving quickly, you're generating queries on the fly. You want to make sure that you have a back-end system that can absorb that workload and that you're running thousands of concurrent analytics, or you're running, millions of real-time transactions, that you have a platform that can absorb that. And I think people are that's one of the challenges to make it real in an industrial scale and a financial scale. And then letting more of the executives and the application teams who are less familiar with querying and machine learning to get access to analytics and data science, while maintaining the security, the auditing and provenance, and and ensuring the total cost of ownership through good processing speeds. So again, just to put a finer point on it, when we look at how to build a data platform that's AI ready, we're talking about something with interactive latency, right? Something that can respond again to thousands of queries a second at SLAs of a second, that has the ability to scale up from a concurrency point of view, so that you're really running it many things at the same time, and that you're able to balance those workloads, and then providing the MCP interfaces so that the LLMs and the AI can have lower token costs. They're not reinventing things on the fly. It's using pre-advertised functions from tools that it can trigger, which means that you're not just using tokens to learn how the platform works, but you're providing MCP to really automate everything through AI, and then do the actual computation and the processing without moving the data, if you can be an effective measure. So these are the kind of principles that we've built Tanzu Data Intelligence around. And what it gives you is the full platform. So it gives you the data loading and data sourcing, storage and computation, data quality and governance, BI, AI, ML, and real-time data, and to cover your vast estate of structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. So everybody's familiar with, let's say in the financial industry, you're dealing with stock trades, that would be structured data. But once you start dealing with 10Ks and quarterly reports and annual, letters from shareholders, or you're reading news articles and trying to bring that in, that's, unstructured data. So all of that together that you can run, and if you do run it on the VMware Cloud Foundation, that provides you that private cloud, elastic, secure environment to run everything. We actually have at VMware optimized the storage layer. So we're very proud of vSAN, and we optimize storage clusters, and in tech preview are object storage, and the ability to create different temperatures and tiers of data where you can push data to different tiers. You know, the older, let's say, archive trades or transactional data go into the storage tier, and your high-speed compute is maybe in a closer block tier. And so we have a completely optimized architecture to have a all-in-one solution for this data environment that still maintains that high speed interactive querying with low latency so that an AI is not sitting and waiting. Just double clicking again at Greenplum, which is at the heart of the data intelligence platform, that this system is what can ingest different data types, relational data, unstructured data, semi-structured data. It can be streamed in real time. It can be queried externally through PXF. You can connect through Spark or NiFi to interrogate or to work with the data. And then internally, then it can do text search, text analytics, OLAP querying, machine learning, geospatial processing, graph processing, all through the power of the database internals, which is then connected to the storage tier. And let's say storage tier as a reference might be VMware Private Cloud, VMware Cloud Foundation with vSAN. And then you can interact with it through MCP, through the Greenplum SQL editor, through AI, and automate everything. So this process of really bringing AI to the data platform, there's two scenarios. There's one where you're the data analyst and one where you're the DBA. So all of our DBAs now are pushing, give me more DBA functions through AI that I can access through MCP. I can create my own agents. And we're creating a vast array of AI functions to manage the platform. But then as well, the data analyst is being empowered in new ways. So instead of sitting there purely writing code, we've changed to a conversational approach. So in a conversational approach, let's imagine we're working at a credit union or a bank, and we say, I need help writing a query. So the system can actually write queries for you. It can write you the query based on your spec. You can also just directly have a conversation and ask questions. What is the average loan size for this zip code? And it will bypass even trying to educate you. So people are saying now, programming languages are the new assembly. What that means is assembly language, everybody in college in computer science learns it, but no one ever codes it because the system codes it for you. And so people are moving up the stack. They're not writing code as much anymore, and they're just directly interacting with the system. Now, you can think that LLMs can answer everything, but there's also a deep background in statistical machine learning. I'm going to turn this one over to Jared and say, how do you see the statistical machine learning space? In other words, things like support vector machines or regression algorithms or classification algorithms. How do you see the relevancy of those algorithms in use cases today? And the hypothesis, are they still relevant given that you have an LLM model?
Yeah. 100%. And I kind of think about whether you're going for narrow AI, where this is where the machine learning tends to fit. And a perfect example here is we're currently working on a document classification example where we're getting literally tens of thousands of PDFs in a day, and we need to classify those based on document type to feed a downstream process. The go-to is, hey, I'm going to go feed this through an LLM, right? These are large documents. You can chunk them up. You can get in there. We actually ran testing all the way through, and using BERT or an encoder and then feeding that into a classifier actually gives you much better accuracy than an LLM. It's also a fraction of the cost once that model is trained. The inference on that is very, so that model is only good at classifying these documents that it's seen before, and it'll do that narrow task, but it's going to do it cheaper and better. So these models, ML is not going away. And I think that the combination of coding assistants and agents being actually able to help you train traditional machine learning kind of opens up this bigger ecosystem. However, it becomes really, really complex if it's all over the place. So driving it all into a single environment like you guys have set up here and what we use with the data intelligence suite is kind of like the ideal scenario. So it simplifies having many models that the LLM can then reach out to in terms of machine learning models. Yeah.
Right. So, and ultimately, the idea is, I think, when you used to write this without AI, how long would it take you to build a ML model that could classify PDF documents? And then, is it faster to build one now that AI is available?
Yeah, but magnitudes a lot quicker. That doesn't mean, LLMs still hallucinate, right? And if you just dive in and get it to build something, you could have something totally incorrect. So it's good to still, be systematic around going through the whole data science life cycle. So the exploratory data analysis, the feature engineering, and LLMs will definitely help you kind of go through that path. So much very quick, but it's also not click button yet today. I think it'll get there. Yeah.
So I think that, and Jared, thanks for mentioning about our platform, right? Because in Tanzu Data Intelligence, within the platform, we can do spatial analytics, graph processing, time series, vector analysis, text analytics, and machine learning. But to be honest, it requires skills, a lot of skills and a lot of time to assemble and call all the right functions. The good thing is it's all in one platform. It's all with the data. It's all in one VMware compute environment. But I think the hypothesis here now is, now that you can use AI to make this faster, you can trigger all this very efficient and powerful algorithms and have it all be in one place. If that makes
Absolutely. And I think you can move faster too. And I don't want to say constrained down to an environment, but if the LLM is working within a set of boundaries around a specific set of technology, it helps you getting off track. And those that have built a green, starting off with a vibe coded app, you'll notice that LLMs, depending on which one, you end up with multiple databases. It's pulling in X, Y, and Z all over the place. So focusing it in this technology set also helps you move faster and basically build something
And
that's
it'll be
ready to
production ready, I
deploy.
think.
Yeah.
It'll be production ready when you're done, in a sense.
That's the other piece of it too here. We talk a lot about day two. So it's not just about training the model or doing these things one off. It's how do we actually get them into production, have many models being versioned and created over time, and being able to kind of have those in a single environment where we can trigger updates as we hit model drift or do A/B testing, champion challenger, these type of things in a single environment. And back in the day, we could argue that potentially Python and some of these other ecosystems might be the way to go, but the product here has matured so far that it actually makes a lot of sense doing it and bringing it very close to the data. And I think when you showed the previous architecture slide, one thing that's going through my head is, well, I've been looking at this for over a decade. Like these are not solutions someone vibe coded together over the last couple of years. These are enterprise hardened, run at scale, work well together, have all the connective tissue that's required in order to move fast, right?
That's right. Oh, okay. So, and then the way it works, just for people to understand, is that you can connect any, you basically connect any LLM, and Jared may advise like, hey, use open weights to keep sovereignty of your weights and all that. But you have the option to bring an open source model to use, a Claude or open ChatGPT, OpenAI model, any model that you have, you connect it through because it goes through MCP, and then from there it triggers all the activity and all the work. And then the important thing, again, just I wanted to really make sure and emphasize, is the efficiency. So within this platform, that we can have a single query interface that can support open table formats like Iceberg, and that can link into other data sets to bring in data from Oracle or from S3, and that it's efficient. And that's the key to the total cost of ownership, is the efficiency. And what it looks like, just as a user, if you bring a client, which is an AI client, and you connect your MCP server over to your AI client, then from there, this is a demo that shows a interactive session and how you can how you can work with the platform. So show me the database tools I have available. It starts showing you I've got GP ML bot training and GP ML bot prediction. I've got database health check. And then I can say, okay, tell me what tables I have. So you can start interrogating in real time what the data is. Here's my call center data. Here's my inventory data. Here's my shipping data. And then, okay, and then the really exciting thing for me is because you have an LLM, you're integrating learning yourself, learning your data, and doing your work at the same time. So you can even kind of go off the script and say, hey, is this a good machine? Is this a good relational model for this data? And the LLM will help coach you. Is it smart? Is it good? What and help you think. So you've got kind of like a tutor in your pocket as you work with your actual problem. You can start then getting into business intelligence and start asking about trends in the data. It's going to come back and start giving you output. So you don't need although you can have one, you don't need a dashboarding tool or a reporting tool, right? You're now in this new world of conversational intelligence. Talk to my data. Jared, while this is playing, are you seeing talk to my data as a popular use case?
No, number one use case, and it's going away from, you just mentioned not having a BI tool, but more and more people are getting away from even wanting an application at all. They want to actually sit on their phone in a meeting or wherever they are and be able to ask questions about their data. And as you're presenting the stack there, the thing that we hear over and over again is we want to transform our organization into quote unquote AI native. And it's a bit of a buzzword, but what's driving that is the ability to go from an LLM that has been trained on the open internet and has a lot of information about everything except the context of your business and your organization. And so to close that gap there, you really need what's called a context layer, where people are building an ontology of how to connect together all the different data sets and sources and information across your organization. So to do that, you really need to be able to, number one, pull different data sources together, whether they're unstructured documents, decks, even transcripts from calls, and then merge that with your operational data, which is going to be in your SQL data warehouses, but pull that information together in a way where you can start doing this talk to your data in a secure and safe way. And we'll talk about that here in a second, but it kind of unlocks the capabilities of your organization if you just have straight access to information without having to reach out to an analyst or someone to go write a SQL query and build a Power BI dashboard for you, right?
Correct. And Jared, we have some roadmap, which I'm not going to talk about future stuff here, but we're working on the semantic layer, the merging of structured and unstructured data, and we have some good releases coming out. You'll hear about in the next few weeks. But let's move on here. Um,
Hey,
uh,
Ivan, we
yeah,
did get a question
yeah,
from the previous slides. Someone was just asking about which databases were being used or any
yeah,
database recommendations, as well as a recommendation on the software stack being used as well.
yeah. So the software stack is Tanzu Data Intelligence, which is what covers and we're demoing and showing this on the VMware private cloud. And so what that represents is an all-in-one stack to go from data ingestion, data cleaning, data processing, querying, analytics, talk to my data, and then reporting and output. So it's the Tanzu Data Intelligence and Greenplum database stack. Now that's supported by bring your own AI, LLM, and your own client program, like whatever your favorite one is, Microsoft Copilot or Cursor or any kind of a software stack. So these resources are going to get sent out, but I want to give to people who joined the webinar via email. But Jared, if you could introduce now, we're really excited to see what you've done with Greenplum and what you've done with data science. So if you can introduce Strongly AI.
Perfect. Yeah, I covered this a little bit during the intro, but we had a very, very strong team at Greenplum, Pivotal over the years coming together, and pulled a lot of those folks together the splits and had a consulting company for a long time, really specializing in the Tanzu Data Intelligence stack. So everything from Gemfire, Greenplum, now moving into MCP and AI. What we found is there's a lot of repeat plumbing that we solve for with Tanzu. More on at the application layer. Now you get into things like AI harnesses for agents, workflows that help to tie together some of these underlying tools and the ability to kind of build AI apps and deploy those in a secure environment. So we've kind of built a thin layer that sits on top of Tanzu Data Intelligence, and around that we have an engineering team, which is a lot of the old Greenplum folks that we've been working with over a decade here, and some of the numbers I was pulling up with, over 55 large enterprise deployments. The largest one I could see on my list was 380 terabytes of data in a Greenplum cluster that we're running analytics on. And for that retailer, they were pulling up all these nice dashboards of everything around their organization. So we've got more than a decade of experience with Tanzu Data Intelligence. We've spent a lot of time thinking and experimenting and blowing arms and legs off, doing things the wrong way, and then figuring out the right way in terms of how to get these technologies working together in the AI LLM space so that we can move very quickly. A lot of experience around regulated environments. So I kind of mentioned this earlier. I'd say about 50% of the folks we work with cannot use third-party LLMs. So we've spent a lot of time in figuring out how to efficiently deploy open
So
weight
Jared,
models.
let's put a finer point on that, right? So if a customer wants to use Tanzu Data Intelligence, but they also want to bring their own LLM, you know how to help them sort that out and get it going, right?
Yeah, so within the VMware private cloud, we can actually deploy that, and not only deploy it and have it running all the time, which is, costly, right? We can get things like warming, scale up, scale down, high availability, and all the bells and whistles that you're going to need to actually use this within an enterprise system. And then I'll talk a little bit about the engagements that we work here, but we've actually pulled a lot of the things that we used to do at Greenplum around helping organizations who don't know where to start with AI, going all the way from there to helping get a quick win, productionalizing that to then the day two around how do we keep this running for years, not just get something out in production. If we go to the next slide
Yeah.
here. So an example of this, we just mentioned talk to your data. This is the number one use case I hear coming up all the time. Folks, especially executives, they do not want to continue to be bottlenecked by reaching out to research teams. And an example of an organization we were working with earlier in the year, the CFO was telling us that when they want to ask questions, it sometimes takes a couple of weeks for them to get an answer back. And more recently, they found out that they were getting responses from multiple analysts, and they were finding the numbers didn't even match up. And so then there's this whole effort around single point of truth, and why is this metric that's the same over here not equaling each other over the same time period? So specifically for CFOs, we see this virtual financial analyst version of the talk to my data come up. And if we go to the next page here, we can kind of drill into this. So, as I mentioned, a lot of time today, analysts are spending, reconciling that information, trying to find that single point of truth, writing SQL queries, and then building some kind of Power BI deck or dashboard or Tableau or any of the others. We are seeing now LLMs helping this process a lot. So those analysts might be spending their time with MCP, helping move quicker, but they're still the piece in the middle, right, that it has to go through. We also see folks doing a lot of vibe coded apps right now, which interestingly, they're very, very cool and interactive dashboards and stuff, but there still seems to be a pain point in terms of how to deploy those within the enterprise securely so that, if there's role-based access control and all the rest of that going around. And then how do you pull all this information together is still a really big struggle. And it's part technology. It still is part just organizational friction around, security, getting operational stores together with unstructured data, PowerPoint decks, and all the rest. And to get around that, you do need to have the kind of security and governance controls to bring that together. So
Jared, can you share a little bit more about the use case? Like, so when you have earnings call transcripts, what kind of thing might you do use with that for?
yeah, perfect. So in this case, what we're bringing together, these folks had a set of multiple applications that sat on top of the same data set. So depending on who the end persona was, so in some cases it would be customers that they were trying to bring on and sell financial products to, and so they were trying to prove how these went over time and pull up signals and then marry those back with the actual reported outcomes from the 10Ks or from the earnings call to say they're ahead of the time, various memos that come out. There was also this whole piece around the fund management, right? And so what you start getting into who's actually investing in some of these more private funds, get into the PE and VC side of things, and say similar type of documentation. But it gets, you end up with this ontology or set of entities across who's investing in what they've invested in. It's usually not one company. There's all these subsidiaries and connections and graph that goes into that. So the kinds of questions that they're asking are really, from a sales standpoint, how do we prove that we're ahead of the game, that we've got our customers invested into this at an early point? And they're often not allowed to show what their investors actually did. So they try to go back and show, hey, we talked about this in the news or on CNBC at this time, or we published an email or a letter notification out to all our investors on this date, and then we saw this signal come through at a later time was a big use case on the sales side. Again, the gap there is that this information was taking a lot of time, even with the LLM kind of helping out the analysts. So how do you kind of get the analyst out of the mix? Also, how do you pull this unstructured data together with structured to find the new information that they haven't even asked for yet? And every time we kept hearing it from this customers, they would be out trying to sell product, and the investor or who they're trying to sell to would ask questions that they'd never even thought about before, right? So that's something right there that if you have talk to your data, you can plug that in and pull that out. So having that together, data in the same place is kind of critical there. And if we go to the next slide, I can drill more into what this looks like. So I have some of the questions here on the side or indicated where we're going at, but some of the things that we're getting asked was around fee schedules. A lot of times when these documents come out, they actually get restated at a later date. So if you kind of go into this with just traditional RAG and you're doing semantic search, you end up with this issue of the LLMs are not really good at understanding the temporal nature. Sometimes they don't even understand, 2019 became before 2024. Definitely getting better at this with the ecosystem of tools and being able to call these uh, additional pieces within the harness or wrapper. But for the core model, it is actually not good at pulling this out. And then you add in RAG and the semantic search, that doesn't go well. So having this temporal tags around understanding when a document came in hasn't been superseded by a restatement is very important. A question that we got a lot was, who is the CEO of this company? And it would sometimes pull in the CEO that wasn't even there anymore. So again, example of the temporal. I kind of touched on a little bit, but the compute piece. So when you get into talk to your data in finance, especially, you get a lot of things around what was the min, the max, the average, these basic kind of statistics, calculations that you need to run over the data. If you have data kind of pushed in and chunked up in a vector database, that does not work well at all. Even if you pull the chunks out correctly and then pass them into some kind of calculation function or tool, you tend to miss a lot of information. So this is an example of, it cannot do that compute. The other thing is traversing over relationships. So when you get into funds and investments, there's all these components that come together as a graph that are very important, right? And if you can't traverse through that and pull that information, it becomes challenging. We've kind of touched on this several times, but having both the documents or the unstructured data alongside the operational or trade data, investment information actually in the structured SQL database is really critical, and that helps you answer some of these questions like which of our positions have covenant language X, right, which is going to hit your vector unstructured, but then what are they currently worth? It's tough to kind of trust the LLM and just a vector store there. So that's an example of when you would want to kind of tie these together. I'm trying to move quick because I have some of how we actually go about doing this.
Yeah,
So
let's go to
yeah.
it.
A couple other things just quickly highlight here is there was a paper from Stanford, I think, about semantic collapse over like 20,000 records that turned out to not be a real thing. However, you do see semantic collapse as you add more and
Can
more
you
vector
define
data.
semantic collapse, Jared?
It's just the quality of the retrieval and the ability to pull out the information that you want kind of degrades at a certain point, right? And it makes sense. This is basically a search problem, right? And when we're doing semantics, what we're doing is we're taking an embedding or actually applying the essentially a model to turn text into ones and zeros, and not just basic like we used to do. Is there a cat? Word 1, 0, yes or no. It's actually a much more high dimensional complex structure that starts
Thousand
to
dimensional or something, right?
yeah, well, it depends, right, which model you're using, but it can get very large, and it basically captures a lot more of the information, and that's how LLMs, as you're pulling in, doing a prompt, we apply the embedding. The vector database has the same, and we just do a similarity score across that, such as cosine similarity is very popular. As you're going through that, though, we want to pull that information out very quickly, and then we do things like re-rankers, which are more computationally intensive. But we're
Jared,
trying to,
I have to ask out of curiosity. Can you explain what a re-ranker is?
yeah. So when we're pulling information from a vector database, we use something like a cosine similarity, and there's typically a lot of data in that vector database. So we want to use something that's not so computationally intensive, so that we can pull out a k number of vectors or chunks out of that information. At that point, though, we can apply a re-ranker, which might be a more computationally intensive algorithm over that to then re-rank that information and further filter it. And the reason you're trying to do this is these LLMs only have so much context that they can take in the window. So as you're kind of filling out, you want to kind of have the best information there for the LLM to go through. Playing that further out, right? If you have petabytes or hundreds of terabytes of data sitting in that, we need to filter it first before we get into this. And this is where hybrid search comes into value. And there's things like GP text in Greenplum that we can use to create indexes to do a single search. We can also do a lot of things around metadata as well. And so that's how we are able to then kind of scale things out. And I'll talk about this a little bit on the next slide. Oh, sorry. One very important point there on 6. Security organizations, especially in enterprise, which most we're working with that have been created before this idea of AI native, where you do have siloed data, there's security policies and things that need to take place across that data. Not everyone has access to all information. That becomes more and more complex as you join different data sets together, and keeps a lot of executives and the folks on the security and compliance teams up at night, right? So one of the things that I see why these initiatives fail is not having an answer to that, right?
Right. Gotcha.
Cool. Okay, so and why don't we start with that, right? So with
Yeah.
Tanzu Data Intelligence, we actually have the ability to propagate the identity single sign-on, the RBAC from the actual source system through into, say, Greenplum, so we can apply these policies at query time. Ivan, did you want to add to that? I think this is a
This is my, yeah, you keep going. This is my, better to hear from someone else than me again, the same thing.
Okay, so I think this is absolutely critical. You need to do it at query time so that you're actually not pulling the information back, potentially having the LLM merge into data that should never actually be together for that particular user. So, this is critical. It's non-trivial to do with a lot of other stacks that are out there, and this is something that within Greenplum is very straightforward, and the overall Tanzu Data Intelligence stack, bring in Gemfire and some of the other pieces. The MPP at scale, just kind of running back through the list here, is there's quite a few tools out there now that allow you to kind of scale things up, but Greenplum is just very, very straightforward to do this. So once you've got the information partition distributed in the correct way, the Greenplum optimizer that's actually figuring out how do I distribute this query across the segments and the way the data is split up is still the best in the business in my view, and it's even got better over the last couple of years. I see
Well,
Ivan.
because I have to say, our developers in Greenplum are, first of all, they're amazing developers, but secondly, they have access now to AI assisted coding. So some of the projects we had on the queue are now getting released much faster. And so I don't want to put any numbers out there, but like the Greenplum that's from 2026 is dramatically faster and more efficient than previous versions, which was already setting records for data load time. So we're leveraging new things and leveraging the CPU in new ways. So you're going to be shocked when you get your hands on the latest and greatest versions.
That's fantastic, and it did, critical to move quick across large data.
Yeah.
As you said before, you don't want the LLMs waiting, and you often chain together many queries and many calls. So it helps with your SLAs and actually being able to create production system. The metadata first hybrid retrieval here. So GP text has come a long way over the years, right? So now we actually have the semantic search there with the uh, hybrid options, also just the straight indexing and pulling back data. This is critical because more and more what we're seeing is there's really two approaches. One is you do entity extraction and try and pull out the tagging and metadata on the data ingest, which a lot of times makes a lot of sense. When we start getting into hundreds of terabytes of data and it's a legacy system that we now just want to apply this to, it's actually not really feasible to go out and tag all that information. And also, you really don't want to, because a lot of that data, you might not need the specific tags, or you might not understand what the tags are. So there's some interesting work that we've been doing over the last few years around how do we actually kind of have an agent running as a sidecar and actually going through and monitoring how people are using the system, and then kind of creating tags and ways to distribute, or tags and ways to slice and dice the data as folks are not using the system. So it's actually kind of making it smarter
It's
and
a
creating
feedback loop. It's a
that
feedback loop.
feedback loop. Yeah.
That, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of that where you don't interrupt the live flow, but you have an agent monitoring and it's updating the live system for whatever process you're making.
Yeah, it's definitely the way to go, and a system like this helps that. So that you go and prompt the system one day, you get an answer, and a couple of days later you come back and it's much more like dialed in around what you're asking. It continues to improve.
Yep.
The federated query across both, the structured and unstructured. Also, you kind of flashed earlier a little bit around GP streaming
Yep.
and GBF disk, but the ability to kind of point to a lot of different data sources is kind of critical here when you're building this context layer and solving these type of problems. And then the agents, and I'll talk a little bit about this on the next piece. These aren't Greenplum specific, but they are enabled by Greenplum and the ability to query quickly. As we start building these systems more and more advanced, and you move away from the demo to actually the deployment, what you end up with is the need to run code, potentially do web search in a secure way, login search systems, but also scale out. And we're working on a project where there's thousands of PDFs, and we basically need to scale that out across Kubernetes pods, right? And so you end up with this issue of a lot of data moving around that you need to log, have access to. And so that's when it's important to then have this layering of in memory with Gemfire, so that you can get access to that information at a kind of speed, and as things kind of scale out and scale back down. Memory is also another important kind of topic here as we start to get into autonomous agents, and to do what we just mentioned there about the offline feedback loop, or the dream state, as some of the papers call it, is the ability for the agents to actually have memory. So having kind of small Postgres sitting alongside of those is really powerful, but then having it structured in the same way, I can push back into Greenplum and then query across multiple agents, is really important. And then, as I mentioned, the bitemporal kind of modeling, but understanding the dates is kind of critical as we go here. And for those of you who are familiar with vector database, being able to have the kind of tags alongside. Now, I'm not an expert in vector databases, but I've used at least 5 different options on kind of production systems, and they're not non-trivial to essentially provide a lot of tags around. So you can create metadata, you can squeeze it into strings, and depending on the environment, being able to do it in Greenplum, where you have a complete table that you can then join and merge and do select statements from, is a real core differentiator, which is unfortunately not a lot of other vector databases. You essentially have to have another database alongside, and then do a document ID lookup, so you end up with 2 technologies instead of one. Anything you wanted to add there,
No,
Ivan?
I mean, it's just that the value prop of simplicity and efficiency together, right? I think historically there was a debate, should I get a little special purpose database for every type of thing I'm doing, or would it be better to have just one big thing that's very versatile and agile? And I think over time we see versatile and robust multi-feature data platforms are absorb more use cases and workloads. It's just too much work to stitch together lots of little specialized things.
And I think the delta too of specialized to generalized has closed in terms of the performance and
Yeah, the
the
benefit
value
from
adds. Yeah,
specialized is like not worth being there.
perfect. Okay. So kind of playing off of Ivan's architecture that he showed earlier. So we, point to these various data sources. We tend to use all of the kind of capabilities that Greenplum offers. Spatial, the geospatial, not as much in financial services. There tends to be, or finance banking, there tends to be zip codes and items that we can look up. However, once you get into other areas, being able to point and polygon lookup and these type of items are really kind of critical. So valuable to have there. The time series analysis, the text analytics is really the big one, and GP text. Also, I don't have on here, but it's all about being able to load the data in parallel and be able to customize that load. So if I do want to do entity extraction at load time, I can do that. Everyone talks about parsing PDFs. Anyone that's gone out there and tried to do it on terabytes of unstructured from different sources will know that there's no PDF parser out there that does it all. There's header issues. There's I just hit an issue with a watermark seam down the side that was blowing up. Some things you can pass straight. Some things that need OCR. Sometimes you have a mixture of, hey, I can pass it, but there's sections of it. DocuSign has a particular type of thing with their PDFs, depending on which years you're looking at. So when you start getting into this really diverse data, being able to customize and work with that, either batch or streaming ingest there is really critical. And then being able to scale that out and do that in parallel is another kind of value add that we use a lot. We have our own harness at Strongly that we use in our platform. So when we're building these systems, we have several agents that we pull from. The key ones here that I've listed is really the query intent and filtering, and this becomes the controller that we have. that essentially is running across the other agents, determining do we need entity resolution, um, pulling out, are we looking for a particular CEO as a role, or are we looking for the name of the CEO in particular? Determining do we need to write a SQL query, call MCP, do we need to call another tool, or do we need to retrieve from the vector database is kind of critical. The analysis and synthesis of this data. So more and more we're seeing this is not a um, sequential process. It's actually a series of loop and subagents that run in parallel or a graph. And so we'll kind of run the analysis synthesis of the results. When we do talk to you with your data, we always try and have the reference back to the document or database where the information was stored. We also like to have a set of follow-up questions because we like to have it so a user can go in and like Ivan said before, almost like a coach of like, have you thought about looking at this or slicing and dicing? Report generation is another thing that we spend a lot of time on. LLMs are really good at vibe coding and creating reports that you can show in line. Those are using Claude. However, in an enterprise, you kind of want those to be standardized, have your branding. Folks like to look at data in a specific way, and so you don't want the kind of randomization that LLMs have. So another thing that we'll do is we'll actually, when the query intent filtering comes in, we'll actually go map that using embeddings back to a report template, which will then feed in so we get some more standardization. And then most importantly is kind of the agent as a judge, the compliance, accuracy validation at the end. How many of these pieces you have together is going to be determined on the SLA. Sometimes folks want to type it in and get an answer immediately, and you're judging it in milliseconds. Other time we're looking at seconds, and it's okay to take, 8 seconds to come back, but I'm getting a full generated report, compliance, and there's accuracy validation, and potentially we have a lot of cases where we'll actually even show the agent as a judge score, so we know trust factor on what we're looking at there. So a lot like that kind of goes into this, and we kind of manage this during the what we call a Strongly platform, but it's really in this architecture, really an application layer that sits on top of data Tanzu, data intelligence.
And Jared, did you have information about okay, let's do takeaways. I wanted to also see about the engagement models you have.
Yeah, let's just go to the next slide. I know we're running short on
Yeah.
time here for the QA. So we some resources we post to our blog quite a lot about these things, agent memory and so forth. So check that out. But in terms of how we actually engage with our customers is we have something called the AI Primer. Those of you who've worked in the green plum space a long time, I see Kaushik on. I actually learned how to do this from him over a decade ago, called a lab primer, but we call it an AI primer now. But really, the idea is we come across a lot of folks, executives, where the board has told them, "Hey, you need to go do something with AI." Executive team is getting hit by the CEO. We got to do something with AI, but I don't know where to start, right? Or we've had a couple of failed starts and we don't know where to go next, right? And so in this, we'll basically come in and do a big discovery around, data security, compliance, regulatory requirements, what use cases have been done before, what tools you have, the business problems, really getting an idea of the kind of ecosystem. And then we synthesize that down into a set of use cases that we then work with the customer to essentially plot on a 2x2 versus on level of effort versus the business value.
Jared, if I understand correctly, out of this 2 week engagement, you come out of it having synthesized the business context as to what's practical and what's the most important thing that the customer can actually do. So 2 weeks later, you've got like a feasible idea of let's go do this thing, and this is doable. We know our experience, right?
Exactly. And beyond that, we now use AI, right? So we call it the AI primer. So as we're collecting this information, we also store it in a way that can be then queried later through AI and LLM. So instead of this being just a deck with a roadmap and these ideas. We've actually collected a wealth of information that can help kind of steer things moving forward. So it's a really great kind of foundational exercise that then tees up what we call the AI assembly. But this is getting a thin slice through the entire stack, whether that's talk to your data all the way through, which components of the Tanzu Data Intelligence we're going to use, whether this is going to be in VMware, private cloud, etc. But get that thin slice live through the stack and then start generating value. We really try and find where can we hit value within, a matter of weeks, not many months, and then start
And
iterating
have
and
you had
building on that.
success that in 10 weeks time that you can have people go from idea to production and have something that produces value for the customer
Absolutely, yeah. It's again
all the time, or is it?
part of selecting the right thing, right? If you select the wrong thing, part of that, right, making sure that we have access to the data. There's not going to be any compliance or security issues that are going to stop. So, if you hit those problems, you're going to have delay. But we try and upload that up front in the AI primer and identify those things, and that would go into the complexity of feasibility of being able to execute. But picking the right use case, this is something that we get wins on repeatedly for years now, and being able to get something out, a champion use case
So
that you can
you're
then stand
confident
by.
that given access to the team and access to the environment, within 8 to 12 weeks, you could be showing production outcomes, business outcomes.
Yep, absolutely. We do
Amazing.
that, and we stand behind that too. It says, we've
Sure.
we've gone into these things a lot of time, and a lot of time we'll put some meat in the like skin on the line as well there to
Yeah.
prove that out. Finally, the AI day two. So we get a mixture of folks that actually want to learn how to do this themselves. They know enough to be dangerous with LLMs. They need some experts to come in and just help them get going, but then they're off and running. The flip side is, hey, we're moving really quick and we don't want to lose this velocity. So we need someone to kind of stay in the mix long term, and that's where the AI day two comes from here. And this is where we're monitoring the system for accuracy. Data sources come in, helping load those, but really helping manage those systems long term as well.
Great. So, Jared, we almost hit an hour, and I want to respect the timeline. So, I think this is the perfect takeaway here is that reach out to me. I'll be the traffic cop. I can get you connected to Jared and to the Strongly team. Or if you want to do an evaluation of Tanzu Data Intelligence, the same thing, the software, reach out to me and I'll get connected to your local team. But the idea is the system is extremely powerful. It's all consolidated like in one place. You put your data in there, and then maybe you're going to need some expert advice and guidance. So with a team like Strongly, 2 weeks to figure out what you're doing, 8 to 12 weeks, get something in production that really works, and then take it from there. You're really between the platform and the people. You're unlocking innovation. You're unlocking the growth in your revenue. You're unlocking the operational excellence. So definitely, Jared, thank you for joining for an hour today and giving your insight from the field and real AI workloads. And everyone out there, reach out to us and let's do more projects with Tanzu Data Intelligence, and let's do projects with Strongly, and let's help you innovate. Jared, any last thought?
Thank you so much, Ivan. Appreciate you
Yep.
having us here.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye bye.
Thank you all. This event has been recorded and will be available on demand. Ivan, beautiful send off. Appreciate you closing that out, Jared. Thank you for joining us, and the team at Strongly. Thank you for joining us here today. If you guys will be at VMware Explore, please keep out a lookout. Ivan has a few sessions there that we'll share post event. Catch us on social media at VMware Tanzu to find the recording of this webinar, as well as everything that's happening these next few weeks at Explore. So thank you again, Jared, to the Strongly team. Thank you, Ivan, Arnav in the background. Thanks to all of you guys for joining us. We hope to see you at our next event. Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
AJ, for hosting and for being you, AJ.
All right. Thank you.
All right, man.
Bye, all.
Bye.